Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to let people in as they decide to join as we go through, but very warm welcome to Manager as Coach. This is the fourth session in our series of 5 that we've been running open sessions just to kind of give people 45 minutes to get their head in the game, whether it's around leadership or management, thinking about what's the separate things, what's the new things, any kind of prompted thinking that they can bring to their leadership and management practice, or as L&D practitioners, what can we start thinking about to prep our skills and development for our management teams next year. Like I said, it's just me on my own today. Hayley's off doing something else, so I'm looking for you guys to be really interactive and responsive today. So do feel free to open up your chat box for me and just give me a little hello so I can see that is working for you. Perhaps tell me what you had for breakfast this morning. Thanks, Angela. First up, nice smiley face, lovely jubbly. Coffee, our liquid breakfast this morning for Angela, me too. And Caroline, cup of tea for Caroline, love it, fantastic. Muffins and coffee from Frank. Oh, amazing. Lainey says, still eating porridge. You enjoy your porridge, Lainey. Absolutely. I love a bit of porridge. I'm into my protein porridge at the moment. Pete says, no breakfast yet. Too busy walking the dog. Hopefully you'll get some time to get some breakfast, Pete, after this session. Okay, so let's get into it. Like I said, we are recording this session today. As per usual, I'll send out the link. So if you do want to share that or if you want to watch that back, you're very welcome to do so as well. We're going to be together for 45 minutes today, so a quick pacey session just to kind of set you up and thinking about something new for your day as we talked about. So for those who don't know me, my name's Erica Farmer. I'm the co-founder and business director for Quantum Rise Talent Group, and I've got a background with some of the UK's largest brands such as British Gas, LV, Specsavers and Virgin. There's some roles there listed as well. Everyone's coming in thick and fast now to the session that I've taken part in during my 20-year career in L&D. So just to give you a bit of a background. So what I'd like you to do is just open up your chat if you haven't done that already, and just tell me, how is thinking about manager as coach going to support you in your role? So I'm just keen just to get a quick overview, whether you're a leader, a manager, if you're an L&D, OD, something like that. How is just an understanding of manager of coach? And what I mean by that is we're not going to go through the grow model. We're not going to deep dive into things like listening and skills, because you can access a lot of that content in coaching courses and on YouTube, and there's lots of information available. What we're going to be thinking about is, what does manager as coach mean? And as managers, do we coach? And I guess that's the bit of the pokey question that I'm going to be going after today. Oh, just got a bit of a loud there. There you go. Thanks very much for turning on to mute there. So Josie says, I'll have a new team to manage in January. Fantastic. Angela says, supporting me to enable. Oh, I'm just going to pop you guys on mute because there's just a little bit of background noise. Frank says 2 hats and when to wear them. Absolutely. Jenny says, apprentice manager and trainer. Love that. Okay, fantastic. What else does manager as coach mean to you guys, and how are you going to think about that in your role? Sarah says, it'll allow me to empower my team to make decisions and develop. Yeah, it's stepping away from this command and control type response we have as managers. Typically, and I was very much like this in management as well. I'm the more experienced, or I have the solutions. You come to me when you need something. I can make that happen for you. I can give you the solution. I can tell you what to do. Whereas we know that actually, is that the best solution for the person asking the questions? And does that breed more dependency rather than awareness and responsibility? So that's the kind of things we're going to be thinking about today. Often when we ask the question, are you a coach? That's quite an interesting response that we tend to get as well. So we'll look at that in today's session as well. Lady says, I currently train managers in my day job who are about to be faced with helping their teams to feel coaching approach and will be invaluable. Fantastic. Thanks, Lainey. Pete says, we have hundreds of managers. I'd love them to coach and be as passionate about it as I am. So looking for ways to inspire them, please. Oh, Pete, you've set the bar. No pressure. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Okay, so let's, as we often do, start with the why statement. So we know it's a rapid and constant disruptive and changing environment, and this is what the norm is now. We don't have all of the answers as managers as much as we used to think we are. We now have to sit on a separate space away from that command and control that I was talking about. And that's kind of what's bred through managers throughout. It might be I'm a very strong technician on the Friday, and then suddenly I become a manager on the Monday. And what's the difference with that skill set? I know my technical understanding, whatever that sector might be. So it's easy for me to give you the answer. It's easy for me to tell rather than coach. And we're going to look at the difference of what that means and why that is. It's a massive skill shift. And like I said, we're not going to go into the skills of grow or questioning or listening. We're going to take a step back and think about, why aren't we coaching if we're not? And what's stopping us? What are the kind of myths that get in the way for us as managers when we know we should be coaching, but it's easier just to give somebody the answer because I'm busy, or I've got no time, or I want to feel good about what I'm doing and the job that I do. So we know coaching encourages challenging ideas, innovation, diversity, and productivity. And we're going to look at some stats that sit behind that as well. So I'm going to start off with a little poll for you, and there is no right or no wrong answer on this. It's going to pop up on your screen in just a second. As per always, if you have any issues with security or firewalls and you don't see something pop up in your screen in just a moment, you can give me the answer to this question in the chat. So if you see the poll pop up, I'd like you to select an answer for me. Are you a coach? Yes, no, sometimes, or I'm unsure. So feel free to put the answer into the chat or to put your answer into the poll that's popped up on the screen. Okay, I'll just give it another couple of seconds for people to respond. Thank you so much. Okay, we've got a good response there. Let's see what we've got in the chat. We've got response in the chat as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Feel free to close down that poll just by clicking the little X on the top right-hand corner so you can see the screen again. For those people who selected sometimes, who's going to be brave and come off mute for me, someone who selected sometimes, and tell me why that was the option that you selected? Just feel free to go ahead.
Hi, Erica.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry,
no, you go, Frank.
Well, that's a debate now. Yeah, who's got the least fear? Well, I think sometimes you need to wear different hats, and depending on the situation, and sometimes people may need you to help them understand something versus direct them and give them instructions. Yep. I think it bumps into the idea of situational leadership, perhaps, where you need to understand where you are, with who, and then kind of decide which hat to wear depending on the circumstances, I guess. Yeah. That's why I chose sometimes. Sorry, next.
Thank you, Frank. No, I think your points are absolutely valid. Yeah, depending on the needs of the individual and what box you sit in that situation. Also, am I going to mentor? Am I going to coach? Am I going to consult? Am I going to tell? Am I going to? Yeah, absolutely.
Something like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And sorry, I missed who else was going to contribute there. Please feel free to come in again.
I agree with Frank, really, Erica. I sometimes as well, I'm tied a little bit with regulatory sides of things. So I'm not able to coach in certain areas. So I have to, again, go to direct or, ensure that they are, informed of who they need to go to be able to deal with those sort of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, thank you so much for that. Sometimes the answer has to be the answer, doesn't it? Particularly when it's legal or regulatory or something like that. But again, just think about, and I've seen this with managers before, it's easy for us to kind of say, and I'm absolutely not saying this is where you are, but we kind of can use that as an excuse sometimes for not putting our faith in asking the right questions, so people go and find those answers. So thank you so much. Just a response from somebody who answered yes to that poll. Just open up your mic. Tell me your thinking about that. I don't mind who. Doesn't matter if a couple of people jump in. Who answered yes to that poll? 6 people in the group answered yes. Who's going to be brave?
Okay, so I'll go. So I answered yes because I mean I've recently finished a coaching qualification, and I just feel like it's in my bones. No matter how much it annoys my team, when I ask them, "What do you think?" Is that sort of just. It just sort of seems to be my go-to response. And while yes, of course, you have all the regulatory side of things, I still just sort of stay curious as a coach and let things happen. So I think that's just why I said yes. I identify as a coach is probably how I would say it.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. And I think you raise a good point. It's probably like anything in life, more natural for some people than it is for others. I'm definitely not a natural coach. I will give you advice 9 times out of 10 all the time. It is my natural style because it ties into who I see myself as and my personality preference. So I have to work really hard to go into coaching mode. And I definitely recommend a coaching qualification. I've done one as well, and it really starts to challenge your mindset in that space. But I do, Hayley, you guys have met Hayley, my business partner. She's a natural coach. She'll always ask questions rather than give advice. So if you're someone like me, maybe you just need to work a little bit harder at it as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want you to think about your journey as leader, as coach, or manager as coach, or the role that you're in at the moment, and think about what does that mean and what does leader as coach mean. And we know that there's kind of there's quite a lot amount of research in regards to why we're seeing more of a focus on coaching as manager or leader as coach. And this is from the Harvard Business Review, and it talks about creating that kind of organization, and it's ongoing and executed by those inside the organization. All managers should engage with their people all the time. Sorry, my son's come really strong through my light, so just bear with me 2 seconds. And it's about defining culture. You hear people talk about organizational culture quite a lot, but if we're not asking people to be involved or challenging them to be involved, or if we're not building the right coaching culture, we'll just continue with that siloed mentality of command and control that we talked about earlier. So this is coaching that we're talking about. We're talking about corridor conversations. We're talking about asking the right question when someone comes up and they've got an issue or a challenge. Like Pete's example is, what do you think? Something like that can start a really great coaching conversation, but also drop the seed into someone's head around how they problem solve, or what are their critical thinking skills, or how do you support them to be less dependent on you as they go through their employee journey. So think about, what does coaching mean to you as leader, as coach? Because what we're not talking about here is 2-hour contracted coaching sessions where we go through the full grow model, and there's lots of questions and we have to really stay in the moment and really listen. There's absolutely a time and a place for that. But if you're working in quite a fast-paced industry, something like retail, hospitality, if you've got managers on shop floors, if you're working in the NHS, lots of pressures, lots of stress, do we have the luxury to take 2 hours or an hour off the floor and have a proper full-on purist coaching conversation? If you do, that's amazing. Great, carry that on. In reality, most of us don't have a lot of that. Corridor conversations, Caroline, absolutely. And rather than just giving the response, it's asking the question and prompting that thinking. So that's what we're talking about here. And having that as a natural flow, having that as a natural way of having the conversation. So I want you to finish this sentence in the chat for me. An effective manager as coach, ... Finish the sentence. Bit of blankety blank for you here, for those of us who are old enough to remember blankety blank. What is an effective manager as coach, or what does effective manager as coach do? I'm really interested to see your responses to this. So let's get kind of a finished sentence from everybody. Okay, Christine says strengthens their team and allows them to shine. Nice. I love that. Blankety blank is back on. There's also a very rude version of it on RuPaul's Drag Race as well, which is one of my favourite programmes of all time. Angela says, takes the time to learn what individuals need. and then helps them to achieve that, just to build on that. So I love that. Frank says is someone you can trust, who actually cares about what you have to say. Yeah. Empowers others to contribute their ideas. What else? What else is an effective thinking? We're thinking that manager as coach. We're not thinking of purist coaching here. We're thinking of the day-to-day conversation, those corridor conversations, fast-paced environment, got a lot of stress, lots of stuff going on at the moment. Pete says believes in someone else having the answer and their ability to discover it. Absolutely. That kind of unlocking, the question that unlocks that thought process for somebody to go off and find or go off and develop. Get things done, Caroline. I like that. I like that practical approach to it as well, for sure. Absolutely. And again, this is what I mean about there's a time and a place for your purist coaching, but sometimes we just need to get things done. And that's where the temptation comes in of, I'm just going to tell you because we got to get stuff done, or we're under time pressures, or it's naturally I'm going to give you some advice instead. Brilliant. Sarah says allows their team to be thinkers and makes decisions as well as trialing their ideas. Yeah, that test and learn type approach is really important. That learning agility, building that agility within your team to be able to go off and try things and take new skills and apply them in record time is going to be, according to the World Economic Forum, one of the most important things that's going to drive competitive edge within organizations over the next 5 years. Having a workforce that can just, actually, we need to change now, we need to turn left. So let's put that down and pick something up and be okay about it. That learning agility is really linked in with those coaching conversations. Okay, so just to kind of summarize where we are on this, we ask questions instead of providing answers. We've kind of summarized that. We enable employees instead of judging them. This is a big thing. Sometimes it's so easy if somebody comes with an idea that we don't like or we don't agree with, or they come up and say something crazy to you and you think that will never work. But automatically that's your judging, that comes in, and that'll come across with the micro signals, your body language, your facial expression, and that kind of stuff. Facilitates development instead of dictating what needs to be done. I think that came up quite clear in your answers as well. So again, this manager of coach piece is very practical. It's focused on the individual, it's non-judgmental, and it's asking the question rather than giving advice. But we know coaching has an impact, but we still see lots of managers not coaching. It's not within the DNA. They're asking perhaps a leading question because they are trying not to give advice, but they are giving advice, or they just give advice. But according to the Institute of Coaching, what percentage of people who receive coaching report increased self-confidence? So this is going to be a chat, hold and send. So what I want you to do is just put your answer in, but don't hit return yet. So don't put your answer in the chat. Just load your answer. Give me a percentage of what you think like the percentage figure is. And then when you've done that, I want you to give me your hand up in the reactions. You're loading the chat, you're not sharing it just yet, but you're telling me when you put your hand up that you've loaded your answer and you're ready to go. Okay, thank you. Let me just have a look. Just got a few more people. Fantastic. Let's get a hand up from everybody if we can. That would be great. Lovely. Just give you another 30 seconds. And on 3, I'd like you to hit return. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we've got high 80s. Okay, that's interesting. And I'm speaking to a predominant L&D group here, so I'm not surprised that that's where you've gone. You guys are pretty much on the mark. 80%. So we know that coaching can drive self-awareness, self-responsibility, but we don't often talk about the confidence piece. And it's the confidence piece that helps people go and innovate and go and do something different. And if they feel safe in this psychologically safe environment, i.e. they can put their head above the parapet and without fear of reprimand or being told off or being, embarrassed or whatever it might be, this is how you get new ideas. This is how you get your teams doing something new, and that learning agility that we talked about earlier. Feel free to put your hand back down for me. I've got one more stat that I'd like you to think about. Again, according to the Institute of Coaching, what percentage of people who receive coaching benefit from increased work performance? So we've got a direct link here into performance and productivity, and we're going to do another chat, hold and send. So if you ever need the business case for why you should invest in coaching with your teams, this is it. Again, chat, hold and send. Give me your hand up when you've loaded the chat box for me. Just give me a percentage. So direct link here into work performance, so kind of a harder KPI, I suppose. And on 3, just give me a return. 1, 2, 3. Hit the return button for me. Some high scores coming through again. Ah, interesting. Thank you. This one, interestingly, is slightly lower at 70%. Why do you think it is slightly lower? Why would you kind of, rather than the kind of 80, some of you guys have put 70, 75, why isn't it 90%? Because we know coaching works. Why isn't it a higher figure, do you think? Bear in mind, this is a link to work performance. Keen to give me your thoughts in the chat, or somebody feel free to come off, open up their mic and share their thoughts. Because I was quite surprised when I heard that for the first time.
Hi, Erica.
Hi, Frank.
Perhaps it's got something to do with the fact that coaching is not just about work, it's also about life as well. You know, how are you feeling and how are you doing it? And maybe that's why the performance is not necessarily there, but the personal growth is.
Yes.
You know, and you suddenly see work as just an element of your personal growth, not everything about your growth. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great shout. I think especially since the pandemic, we have more of a blur between work life and home life. Absolutely. And well-being challenges. So I think your point's really valid. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely through. Pete raises a good point. Follow through. People get swept up in the moment. Are they really clear on what the outcome and the goal is? If you look at all of the research around performance management and coaching, that tends to be the area that falls down slightly. We don't always like holding people to account. So it could be to do with that as well, potentially. Time is a big thing as well. Angela raises that. Errors, but errors are okay, Sarah, as long as we don't make the same error over and over and over again. So I don't have a specific answer for you. I was interested in your thoughts there, and I think all of those are applicable. I was just really interested in your reflections. Christine says, is it because some people find themselves in the wrong role? Potentially. I think it comes down to whether you feel confident, going back to the last score, on execution. And do you work in a psychologically safe environment? That means if you do agree a goal with your manager as coach or a coach or whoever that is, do you feel empowered to be able to go and do that? Because it might be you come up against a tough stakeholder or a process or a policy or something, a barrier that you feel that you can't change. So again, it's being in an environment that enables you to support that as well. And that's not a reason not to coach. It's just being aware of the wider piece and being realistic in the goals that you do agree with your team if you're coaching. So here's a bit of a pokey question. And it'll be interesting to give your thoughts. And if you are, by the way, I'm going to caveat this next question before I put it on the screen. If you are, why do you think some people aren't? Why aren't you coaching yet? Give me your thoughts. Are you coaching genuinely? If you're not, why? If you know managers that aren't, why? Let's have a deep dive into this. What stops us? What stops us sometimes from coaching? And I've shared that, you know, I have to work super hard to get into coaching mode. I'm a level 5 practitioner, and I really have to spend time getting my headspace when I'm coaching into the right space, because I'll just give advice. It's just a lot easier for me to give advice. Quicker to do it yourself, Caroline says. Absolutely, isn't it just? Let's just get it done, especially if you're a preference, you know, you might be a bit of a fiery red in terms of insight or disc, you know, a bit of a D, a bit of a demander. Let's just get it done. Let's just get it sorted. Let's get it over the line. Fear of the answer. I love that as well. Yeah, what's the can that we might open? What might come out of that if we ask a certain question? Goes back to Frank's point earlier around coaching being around personal as well as professional. Absolutely. Frank says understanding there's a difference between managing and coaching down to training. Yes, we work with quite a large number of corporates and we run coaching sessions. And sometimes managers genuinely think they're coaching when they're mentoring or when they're giving advice, information, advice and guidance or something else, counselling, going the other way, potentially taking on too much. Christine says it can be a self-confidence thing. If some people are not secure in their role and they feel challenged, absolutely. Time, that's a big one, Sarah. Opening the can of worms, Pete, for sure. Jenny says, don't have the language skills. I have to think before I speak. Sometimes that's one of the biggest challenges is like, what's the question I'm going to ask? And how can I make sure I'm in the moment? And really listening to what that person's saying rather than, oh, I've got the answer, so I'm going to jump in straight away and give you that advice or ask you that loaded question. Angela says pace requires answers and coaching can follow. Pace of the business, yeah, for sure. But it's a bit of a false economy sometimes, isn't it? Because if we just give answers all the time to our team, if we just give that advice without supporting them and enabling them to go and find their own answers, what's the trap we might find ourselves in? Give me your thoughts in the chat. What happens if we play the time card, the pace card all the time? Because it's so tempting. It's so tempting. What could be the downfall for us slightly longer term by not coaching and not investing? Team can become too dependent, Karina says, for sure. So then they come back to you every time there's a query and you think, oh, for God's sake, why are you coming back to me and asking me that question? Or why didn't you go and find that out last time? Or why are you asking me that question? It's because we are encouraging that dependency. It can become very rigid. Absolutely, Christine. We don't develop the capability. Coaching for a manager is one of the key traits that we should be working through. Our dependency as a manager, our capability, our responsibility as a manager is to get rid of those barriers, is to enable our teams to perform at their best. And one of the best ways we can do that is by raising self-awareness and responsibility through great coaching questions. Innovation, Angela, absolutely. People just do the same stuff over and over again. And where we are at the moment and where we've been since the pandemic and where we're looking to next year, that's not going to cut the mustard anymore. We need to do things differently in pretty much most sectors. Sarah says your team don't develop, they may feel that they're not supported or challenged or to grow, so they leave. Absolutely. We know with newer generations coming through, the number one thing that's important to them is career development. And what comes with that is not just L&D, but also coaching and support as well. So we need to think about these things. So what I want you to think about now, no problem, Frank. Thank you so much for your engagement. We're going to do a little bit of...
Have a great session. Sorry, guys.
Adieu. Take care.
Bye.
I'm going to put up some myths on the slides now, and I want you to bust these myths for me. So think about if you're a manager talking to another manager, or you're an L&D practitioner, or you're a coach, and you're talking with someone that just doesn't buy into coaching. And I'm going to kind of put a number of myths up on the screen. I want you to bust those myths for me. I want you to give me the reason for why, what your challenge would be back to that manager who isn't coaching yet. Okay. So let's have a look at the first one. Coaching takes too long. It's just easier to do it myself. What would be your response be to that manager who debunks coaching, who isn't bought into it, and they're saying that they don't have the time to do it? And we hear this all the time from managers, even though you can talk about all the benefits, the increasing confidence, the increasing productivity and work performance. In the short term, yes. Long term, no, Caroline says. Not developing your people. What about when you aren't there? How will your team cope? Love that, Christine. So that's a lovely question. What's going to happen if you're not in work for the day or for the week or for the month or whatever it might be? What else? I just don't have time. It just takes too long. Why do I need to ask all these questions when I can just tell somebody what to do? The time it takes to coach reduces over time. Pay it forwards. Oh, nice. I like that. Absolutely. And what's really going on for this manager, would you say? This is the superficial thing that we're the top of the iceberg that we're seeing right now. This is the words and the behavior. But what's going on underneath the iceberg, do you think, for this manager? Don't you want to move on with your career or develop yourself? Yeah, absolutely. They're overworked potentially. What else could be going on? Confidence. Now we might be getting somewhere. Absolutely. What's often going on for somebody? Insecurity in the role. Yeah. What else? Because sometimes we take things at face value and it's not always about face value. Fear. Thank you, Caroline. Absolutely. It's often fear. Fear of, oh God, what happens if that person gets upset? What happens if we have a difficult conversation? What happens if they tell me something I don't know how to deal with it? What happens if I don't have the answer? What happens? You know, we go into this realm of stuff rather than just being in the moment. So again, that's where an element of training around coaching for managers can at least give them a bit of a framework rather than throw them in at the deep end, because the fear, that emotional hijack, starts getting in the way. Okay, how about this next one? Coaching's fluffy and soft. It's like a HR thing, and it's just not really tangible. It's a thing that HR and L&D do, isn't it? How about that? What would you say to that manager that's just not bought in? Christine says coaching is being shown to be great for the business, and this is the direction we want to take. So what support do you need in moving this way of working forwards? Love that. I love that's actually quite loaded, but in a good way. Kind of, this is the way that we're going to go with it. So get on board. That's definitely my style of coaching. It's just a thing that L&D people do. Some managers do it, but it's just soft. I just see it as soft and fluffy. It's not a thing for me. What would you say to that manager to debunk that myth? It's action-centered, Josie. I love that. Tell me a bit more. What do you mean by action-centered? Just open up your mic and tell me a bit more about that.
I think I mean that good coaching conversations always have a way forward at the end. There is always a next step. There's always something else. There's an action plan, isn't there? It's never just a conversation that doesn't lead anywhere. Yeah,
I love that point. That's such a critical point, because it's what's the next steps? What's the action that you were going to go and take away, or what support do you need me to help you do that XYZ? For sure. Love that. Brilliant. Good point. Caroline says ask questions to understand the perspective. Yeah, absolutely fine to make it tangible. Christine says soft skills are being shown as important for strong mental well-being. As a manager, it's important to ensure that your team feels valued. Yeah, that value proposition and that employee experience is becoming more and more and more important for people when they are choosing employers, or where employers are looking for talent in the market. It's no longer becoming a nice to have, these kind of things, training, coaching, L&D. It's becoming a fundamental for what people demand from their employers. And more you're seeing evidence and research of interviews that are very focused around what does that coaching plan look like? What does that L&D plan look like? No longer is it the employer interviewing the employee. It's more of that two-way conversation now. Karina says coaching has great benefits, and the individuals and business can bring out fantastic ideas from your team being listened to. Sarah says, have they ever been coached, and what was the experience? Yeah, because actually that might be their experience. Back to Josie's point, there wasn't a tangible outcome or action that happened. It was just a chat, and that's what coaching can't be, is just a chat, because everything has to have purpose and intention. And our intentions are always good. And I'm not saying you get it perfect or right every time, first time. Of course you don't. We're fallible, and that's not the case. But just giving people the toolkit and the skill set to build that confidence that we talked about earlier and build that awareness is absolutely key. How about this one? I'm already coaching. I coach my people all the time. Yeah, I do this. It's fine. I don't need to go on that training course, or I don't need to learn more about this, because I do this anyway. We hear this a huge amount. And then when you ask people, okay, what kind of questions do you ask when you're coaching? It's a very different experience. And this is why, going up on my soapbox a little bit, with bigger L&D sessions, when you've got managers in coaching sessions, this is why it's so important to do it, to say the words and get them saying the words, rather than just having a conceptual conversation. So if you're running coaching training for managers, or feedback, or difficult conversations, anything like that, the focus should be on practicing saying the words, because that's where you really pick up the gaps for line managers and leaders. Have they ever been coached? How do you do that? How have you seen people develop? I love that. What else could we use to challenge this myth or debunk? Yeah, I'm already coaching. You don't need to talk to me about that. I coach anyway. It's fine. I do this. Setting some coaching CPD and group activities to get them to coach each other. Love that. Absolutely. How do you share best practice? Oh, great, fantastic. So maybe, we could use that to support other managers coaching, or what kind of coaching style do you use? What results have you had from coaching? That's a good one if we're talking about tangible outcomes. Observations, Sophie says new approaches and theories are developing all the time. Plus your team will undoubtedly change. With each individual, you need to tailor your approach 100%, absolutely. And that personalisation is exactly what people are looking for now, no longer that sheet clip approach. It's just not appropriate. It's just not appropriate anymore. Brilliant. This is my one that I was planting the seed with you earlier as a bit of a provocative point. I'm not a coaching type. I'd rather just tell. It doesn't come naturally to me. It's not my personality style, right? I'm going to put myself in that box. It's just not my personality. Josie says it's not about you. Yes, I love that response. And you got 3 thumbs up already. Brilliant. Yeah, it's just not part of what I do. I just don't do that as a manager. I'm just not the coaching type. Just doesn't come naturally to me. Or how else would you debunk that manager, that myth? What would you say? What would you do? What would you say to that person? What does come naturally to you? What do your people need from you? Absolutely. Again, it's as managers, we need to be putting ourselves as that supporter, to service, to lead. We are there to enable and empower. That's our job. And sometimes I think there's a gap there in perception around what the role is a manager is and what the role isn't of a manager. So good managers need to be able to coach. Do you consider yourself to be a good manager? Oh, Christine, that's a little bit pokey. I like that. It'd be interesting to see what kind of responses you would get from that. Caroline says, what makes you say that? Do you ever ask questions of others? Do you listen to people? Yeah, all these good coaching skills that we see. And it'll be interesting if you're working with your managers, particularly having the conversations around coaching, or if you're developing them in this space, or if you're a manager yourself wanting to develop, just start to listen to some of the narrative around coaching. Start to listen to see if you're hearing any of these things superficially or under the surface. Remember, we talked about the fear thing that might be the real thing that's driving. So start to have those conversations in your managers and your organizations. My people don't want to be coached. I actually heard this on a coaching webinar last week from a manager. They don't want to be coached. They just want to get on with the job. They just want me to tell them what to do. I know that because we talk about that in our one-to-ones. So it's fine. They don't want it. How about that one? And like I said, we hear that as a genuine reason, excuse, top of the surface, top of the iceberg from managers. What is their experience of effective coaching? Absolutely. It might be that they're confusing coaching and mentoring. It might be they've not had great coaching. How do you develop your team? Absolutely. And the one that links in with this as well, which I'm sure you've probably come across, I've tried coaching before and it didn't work. Yeah, it's just not for me. It's not my style, so I'm not bought into it. So therefore, I'm not going to coach. Again, start listening to the reasons and the things that people tell themselves. What's that story that we tell ourselves about why we don't coach and develop our teams? What value do you think coaching has? Digging to the understanding of coaching, for sure, absolutely. And this is so important for this manager of coach role because managers come in so many different shapes and sizes, and it might be like we talked about at the beginning. There's a technician that's the technician on the Friday and then an accidental manager on the Monday. Do we give them the right skill set, mindset, supporting behaviors to get them to buy into this, let alone support their teams? And managers have so many other things on their plate. It's easy to prioritize organizational deadlines, project deadlines, communications, emails, sometimes, rather than actually what do my team need from me today. Explore their experiences and also their knowledge of training and coaching. Love that. Absolutely. So we're coming up to the end of the session. These sessions always go really quickly, just a little bit of a taster. Angela, try something different. If we're going to underline and summarize this session today, I love that. That kind of does that for me. So what's been your biggest learn or takeaway from today's session? I just want you to, don't give me War and Peace, but if there's just one little thing that struck a chord with you today, one little light bulb, if you've written a word down or a sentence or something, what is that? Please share that in the chat for us today. Even if it's just something that's popped into your mind where you've been reading other people's comments. More coaching, less advising. Taking the time is worth it, Sophie, 100%. And it's getting managers buy-in to that as well. And that kind of debunking of the myths is a good way to do that. Find time to coach, deeper insight. Yeah. And coaching doesn't have to be about, oh, what are the words that I'm going to say in my questions? And what do I say next? And what happens if they say this and I say that? And it doesn't have to get that fearful and that deep. It's just about having a great conversation and asking the right questions to support your team members. Josie says self-confidence and performance stats. It is interesting, isn't it? There's quite a lot out there, really interesting. Finding the time for sure, absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much. We have one more session that's available that will be running on the 12th of December around inclusive management. That will be the last session in our series. I'll be sending out the recording from today's session. Thank you so much for all of your interaction and your engagement, as per usual. Really, really appreciate it. And even if we've just dropped a little seed somewhere with you today that's going to get you thinking about something else or support your practice in some way, that's absolutely been our time and effort well worth investing into this session for you guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Hopefully see you on the 12th. Have a great rest of the day and speak to you soon. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.